Welcome. We are here today to talk about the countdown to a merit-based incentive payment system. Have you decided what kind of payment adjustment you're trying to achieve in this transition year of 2017? My name is Larry Carlos. I'm part of CalHIPSO, which is the California Health Information Services Organization, representing both the Health Services Advisory Group and CMS in helping physicians make it through this transition year. On behalf of the California Orthopedics Association and CBones, we thank you for attending. And we're going to spend the next 25 minutes or so focused on helping us decide how to avoid a payment adjustment. Some acronyms, just so you're all aware, and again, to be aware of. We'll talk about each of these at some point. Today, we're going to have about 10 topics. We are making the assumption that each of you are deemed CMS eligible, otherwise you probably wouldn't be listening, and that we're focusing on getting us all through this 2017 performance year. And we assume that no one wants to take a payment reduction in the 2019 year. Our goals is to help provide guidance to successfully avoid a payment reduction and hopefully get a commitment from each of you to register on our website, which we'll have at the end, for help going forward. In this presentation, we will use this finger to highlight key learnings, some guidance, some insight into the process that might be helpful, generated from other clinicians' experience and experience with other programs. In particular, there's one question as to who should be listening to this, and in particular, should a physician's billing department listen to this? And the answer isn't clear, but every practice is different in operations, and possible to know who in your organization will be contributing to this MIPS process for you. But typically, once you have chosen your pace and understand the measures available to you, working with your billing team to understand those measures makes a lot of sense. Again, let's talk about what is MIPS. So first of all, MIPS is the Medicare Incentive Payment System. It is part of the what everybody commonly knows as MACRA, the Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act of 2015. This program is intended really to drive a number of goals, and these goals, by the way, have recently been updated as of today, but this gives you the thrust of where they're trying to go, and it's really two things. Regardless of what you do in this program, this MACRA is intended to help move clinicians into better outcomes and into a more technological world, and to use the certified EHR to digitize their data and begin using that information to create better outcomes. And that is the thrust. In this program, they have set up a number of avenues to make that happen. For you, in MIPS, you need to report things that are relevant to you. And we'll talk about the measures that are available and some that are most commonly used. But it's in this transition year, while the program has 4 items, there's really 3 to worry about. One is quality, practice improvement, and advancing care and information. The cost component will not start this year. It may start next year, depending upon how the 2018 rule falls out. So again, how does MIP affect you, and are you an eligible clinician? One, we assume if you're on here that you probably know you are, but this sets out the high-level rules of what makes an eligible clinician. And certainly if you're in the categories below and you bill $30,000 in approved charges and you see greater than 100 Medicare patients, you will be eligible and required to participate in MIPS one way or another. We want you to keep in mind that this rule may change in 2018. That becomes important toward the end when we talk about the steps you take to determine what your actions will be for 2017. There are some entities and clinicians exempt from MIPS. Certainly one is if in this 2000 year you are newly enrolled, so you've just started seeing Medicare patients in 2017, you are exempt. If you don't meet the threshold, you are exempt. And then there's another piece of this that are called advanced program models. If you're involved in one of those, and believe me, if you were involved, you'd know, you also are exempt. That, however, just to note, doesn't mean that you cannot participate. You can. If you want to get in the practice of the reporting process, but you are not required to. Again, talking about MIPS, you'll have an option, most likely, to participate in MIPS as an individual or in a group. And in a moment, we'll give you the website to check, but as to whether or not you qualify in each. But there is, depending upon those standards, if you're in a group that bills to the standard or you are an individual that bills to the standard, you will have those options. And again, it's based on how you report to the government using your tax ID number. Again, if you do it as a group, you can join the group and work with them, in which case all of your scores together are measured and rewarded, or as an individual. And here's what you really need to do. One of the first steps is to go out to the CMS website referenced below, use your MPI, enter that MPI, it's pretty straightforward, and it will come up and tell you whether you are eligible both as a group, in a group, or an individual. Now, this program has 4 components to it. One is the APM, which we mentioned but not going to talk about. The other is a full year. We're also not going to touch much on a full year either. We're really going to focus on getting you through the next 90 days. And that includes 2 avenues that MACRA has provided. And they call these PACEs. And one is a test PACE, which really sets up a neutral payment situation, which means you avoid a negative impact to you, or a partial year, which is reporting a 90-day period, which provides you potentially neutral and or a most likely positive payment adjustment. We want to highlight that if you do not do anything and you do not, and you're required to, you will it will result in a negative 4% payment adjustment in 2019. What we want to highlight also is the final 90-day reporting period begins October 2nd. So you'll need to prepare, and we'll talk about the steps toward the end of this end of the presentation. You'll need to prepare and then start collecting information, data on patients October 2nd, all the way through to the end of the year. Quick touch on timelines. Again, highlighting that October 2nd as the final 90-day period. You will have through the end of the year to capture that data, and then it needs to be submitted by March 31st. You'll get feedback to that, and then the adjustments will take place in the 2019 period. Let's talk about the first PACE. Let's talk about the test PACE, which really says in order to achieve a negative payment, all you need to do is provide one quality measure on one patient, or one improvement activity on one patient, or if you have an EHR and you're fairly savvy with it, you can submit 4 measures as part of the advancing care information. And again, depending upon your certified EHR. In this particular presentation, we're really focusing on the quality measures and improvement, and you can do that through claims. We're providing a reference for you that the AMA provided, which is an excellent resource for you to use. It walks you through the test-based process, the one patient, one measure, and again, a straightforward activity that is claims-based. We also want to highlight, too, that if you decide to go this route, the one patient, one measure, we recommend that you submit more than once in order to avoid the possibility that your single submission could have an error in it, and you could you could end up getting a penalty. So when you get your feedback, it would tell you that you have not been accepted, and then you won't be able to fix it. So in the one patient, one measure, if you can take one measure, provide it through 2 or 3 patients, and get yourself covered that way. I've called it is the backup plan to the one patient, one measure. The partial participation was for the full year. In fact, if you have by any chance been collecting information on any of the quality measures for 90 days during any time of 2017, you can use that to submit. We are assuming that at this point you probably have not, and if you're going to try to do the partial year, you need to start by October 2nd and then submit that by March 31st. And we're going to highlight some of that data here in a minute. If you don't have an EHR, and I know this is a concern for many eligible clinicians, if you don't have an EHR, HSAG provides an excellent video on how to submit a partial year without using an EHR. And it's about a 6-minute video that provides you all the information that you need. Just touching quickly around the measures around test and partial. From a quality standpoint, test is submitting one quality measure, and you can choose to do that. If you're doing a partial year, the 90 days, you need to submit at least 6 quality measures. And one has to be outcome and high priority. And when you look at the website listed below, qpp.cms.gov, you will see laid out quite straightforwardly, the number of quality measures you can choose from, and be able to choose the 6 pretty easily. If you look at improvement activities, test means that you only have to do one. And again, to highlight, you can either do a quality measure or you can do an improvement activity. You do not have to do both. You only have to do it for one patient. And again, that's where the title one patient, one measure comes from. One of the nice things about the improvement activities is that most of these are simply attesting to the fact that you're doing those. And you'll see that the activity will have to be a high or medium weight, and you'll see this on the website. And again, it's simply attesting that you've done that activity or that measure for 90 days. On the partial side, you're going to be attesting as well, but you've got at least 4 measures that you're going to have to deal with, and 2 has to be high weighted, and so that limits some of your selection. Now, one note, if you're in a group that is smaller than 15 or smaller, let me put it that way, you don't need, in this improvement activity, you don't need to do 4 activities, you only need to do 2. And that's an exception that CMS made, again, for the smaller groups to be able. Referring to the improvement activity, where I had earlier talked about attesting, I wanted to clarify a bit around that. The attestation function is clearly that. You simply will certify in writing that you have performed the selected improvement activity for the 90 days. You also then will take that written attestation and submit it to CMS during the submittal time frame of January 1 through March 31st. In the third category of advanced care information, this is really focused on individuals or groups who have an EHR and use it, and this EHR is certified in either 2014 or 2015. And if you have an EHR that's certified, you can submit under the test 4 or 5 of the base score measures. And the base score measures, when you go out to the website and look, you will see that it includes such things as e-prescribing, a security analysis, electronic transfer of data, and the like. But again, all things your EHR should be able to do, and would make using this category fairly straightforward. If you were doing a partial for 90 days, you're going to submit some number more than the base, but the base certainly, so you'd have the 4 to 5 measures that you need to do, plus others in this first year. So we tried to put together sort of the step-by-step what to do to figure out whether you should do test or partial, but how to get started if you haven't done so already and you're concerned about that. One is determine your eligibility, and we'll have, again, a site where you can check that on the next slide. But you do want to determine your eligibility, and that can change during the year. If you checked at the beginning of the year, you may now qualify. But it's simply going out to a CMS website, entering your MPI, and it will tell you if you are required to participate in the program. You need to look at your practice, your ability to report using an EHR or not, the types of care you deliver, and look at the measures and identify those that align with your practice. Because what they are trying to do is get you to move toward an outcome-based result within the realms of what you do. And there's enough measures to help fit to your practice. 2 other things in talking to clinicians, and they're trying to decide what to do. 2 questions that have always come up. Where are they in their career? Are they planning to retire soon? Are they moving out of the healthcare field? If so, you may choose not to participate, knowing that you're not moving forward, especially if you're retiring this year, because it won't affect you in the future. And then also assess your financial considerations. We have a slide following this that shows what's the impact if I don't take an action, and what's the impact if I do. And what do I save? What's my return on investment for doing this work, and how do I benefit? And we'll show you that in a moment. With those things in mind, and if you have the option to join as part of a group, you need to decide which way you're going as an individual or a group. And if you're in a group and you're eligible and you haven't talked to your group yet, you need to do that, understand what they're doing, and if you are to participate, what that would mean administratively for you. And they should be able to tell you at this point. Now, once you select your PACE, again, we're talking about either test or partial, you then go out to the website cited here, qppcms.gov, and select your measures. And they have a very nice tool that helps you do that. And that tool also gives specifications around each of the measures, and also gives guidance on how to report. So very useful to do. If you haven't done that, please do so. This is a place where your billing staff may be able to help you to know the types of things, practices you have, and the types of things you're billing for, and then align that to the measure. Once you've done that, you choose your submission method, whether it be claims, registry, EHR. Verify that it's able to do what you're asking it to do around those measures, and then set and then plan to do that submission after the December 31st time frame. And finally, if you have an EHR, verify their capability to do what you want to report if you're going with the advanced care information and or their registry. So this is a slide just to highlight some key points, insight. Again, when we talk about determining your eligibility, if you haven't done so, this is the website to go to. Very simple, enter your MPI, and it will tell you. When you take a look at the financial considerations, what it means to you, we put together this chart to highlight that if you have $30,000 in approved Medicaid charges, you can see that it's a $1,200 payment impact to you if you don't participate. If you do the test pace, there will be no impact, and if you do the partial year, you're set to gain in this first year $1,200. And you can see how that ramps up to $100,000. What I found again is that clinicians are looking at this, trying to understand what the impact are to them, and this shows you that impact. And again, this is just for the 2017 transition year. And then just comments that I've heard. When talking, if you remember, I recommended that if you are eligible with a group, to talk with the group as to how they're planning to participate in MIPS, understanding what that means to you administratively. And again, many people are trying to understand how much work is it for me to participate in a group versus an individual, and what that administrative impact is to me. And that's important to understand. Just thought we'd highlight how simple it is to go out and look at your measures. Back to the CMS website, it really does have a button that says Explore Measures, and it does allow you to pick your measure, and then each of the measures come up for you to take a look at. And as we think about that, we think about orthopedics, we tried to pull together a sample of the types of measures that are available to you as an orthopedist and in this discipline. In the quality category, there are 21 orthopedic specific measures or measures that apply to you. And of that, we highlighted 4 here to give you a sense of what you have to choose from. Their priority, meaning they are you're required to select a high priority measure, so we picked some to show you what you had to do, and then how you can submit those between January 1 and March 31st, 2018. And you can see it can be as simple under quality as a care plan, and certainly then more complex when you deal with the assessment and classification of disease prognosis at the bottom. And these are data-driven under quality, and I say that to say that as we move to the improvement category, there are some 93 measures available to choose from, and all of these are, you simply have to attest to do so. Now, clearly you're going to want documentation showing that you are, but it simply requires an attestation to CMS. And then I wanted to highlight under the advancing care information what those 5 base score measures are, and you can see them listed here, e-prescribing being the most common, but each of these have their description on the CMS website, but all of these need to be done through an EHR. So if you don't have one, you effectively cannot use that classification, or excuse me, that category. I mentioned ways to report around each of those measures. This is just a summary. One of the recommendations that clinicians have been mentioning is, hey, we want to use the same reporting measures that we've used for other programs. And so keep that in mind, what you're familiar with and what you use. But also do note that claims is a viable way to report if that's the most effective way for you, both administratively and economically. Now, there was some mention, let me mention this, there's been some question about, as a group, do I have to register beforehand? And the answer is no, unless your group had planned to use the CMS web interface as a way to submit data. And if your group is going to do that, the deadline was June 30th, 2017. Otherwise, if your group is reporting through any other method, there's no need to register or declare ahead of time. You simply need to submit the measures. Now we want to highlight, as we've reached the end of the presentation, where you can go for additional support. We expect you've got questions. Everyone does, because so much of each of your practices are different in some way, shape, or form, and your options are different, but we want to provide you resources to go to ask questions, and it's our job at CalHIPSO and HSAG to provide those answers to you. In some cases, we may have to go back to CMS, but we will, and get those answers for you. There is also, if you go out to the www.hsag.com/CalHIPSO website, there's a way to sign up for notifications around learning events that we have. And those happen monthly and are on various topics. Some of those will be applicable to you, such as which improvement categories to choose, for example. But if you sign up, you'll get notice of that. Again, we encourage you to call. It's free to you. We are funded through CMS to try to give you the most support you can through this 2017 transition year. So here at the end, I wanted to highlight a couple of topics that tend to be questions throughout this webinar, and hopefully they're ones that you have and we can answer them. Basically, I have 4 topics that typically come up. One is the question is who is really eligible for or ineligible for the MIPS program? We wanted to highlight that the ancillary services are not physical therapists, occupational therapists, and the like. But that doesn't mean that sometime in the future they wouldn't be. But today, when we talk about who is eligible, we listed those 5 or 6 entities: physician assistants, doctors, nurse practitioners, etc. There's a list of folks that within 3 years or so, CMS may make eligible, but are not today, such as audiologists, clinical psychologists, dietitians, and I mentioned occupational therapists and physical therapists. So today we listed who is eligible. In the coming years that may broaden, but today it's really just the few that I listed at the very beginning. There is another question as to whether or not a group may choose the test pace, and if so, how does that work? And to that end, there's some complexities to it, but here's how this would work. Yes, a group can report under the test pace. You cannot use a paper claim. Paper claims are restricted under the MACRA law to individual providers and individual submitters. So you would have to choose, in that case, a measure out of the improvement activity, again, because claims are not acceptable for reporting under quality. If the group has an EHR, reports as a registry, or has any of the other electronic submission methods we've showed in an earlier slide, then indeed they can report 1 quality measure as a group, or 1 improvement activity, or 4 to 5 required advancing care information measures. In addition, the score is recorded as a group, under the group, in a group total, so not all the clinicians need to necessarily contribute. However, they will all be included in the score and in any payment adjustment that should occur. So with that, we thank you. We encourage you to reach out to your association, to us, to T-Bones if you have questions, and we all will endeavor to get you the answers that you need.